Do you know the feeling of your heart dropping straight to your heels? I stood frozen before the empty parking spot where my brand new luxury SUV was supposed to be sitting. 12 hours ago, it was right there. The first three payments barely cool on my banking app. Then her voice cut through the silence, light as a slap. Just buy another one. My sister-in-law didn't realize she had just signed her own arrest warrant. My name is Sienna Cooper, and in my line of work, we do not believe in accidents. I am 33 years old, and I spend my days as the risk operations manager for Redwood Meridian Fleet Works here in Charlotte. My entire professional life is built on the architecture of worst-case scenarios. I track assets. I calculate depreciation. I predict where a variable might fail before it actually snaps. When you manage a fleet of 500 commercial vehicles moving across the Southeast, you learn that chaos is rarely random. Chaos is usually just a person who decided rules were optional. But at 7:10 in the morning on a Tuesday, standing in the designated resident parking of my uptown apartment complex, all my risk assessment models failed me. The concrete under my boots was cold. The air smelled of damp exhaust and impending rain, that heavy, humid Carolina air that sticks to your skin. I stared at spot 4B. It was a prime spot, close to the elevator, well lit, and currently occupied by absolutely nothing. My brand new luxury SUV was gone. It was not just a car. It was an obsidian black fortress of solitude with saddle brown leather seats that still smelled like the showroom. I had made exactly 3 payments on it. 3. The transaction history on my banking app was not even cold yet. Buying that car had been a declaration of independence. For the last 5 years, I had driven a sensible, high-mileage sedan that Luke and I shared. But this SUV was mine. It was in my name. The loan was on my credit score. The insurance policy listed Sienna Cooper as the primary and sole driver. It was the first thing I had bought purely for myself since getting married. A tangible reminder that I was a successful woman with a 6F figura career, not just Luke Cooper's wife or Evelyn and Mark's daughter-in-law. Now, all that remained of my $70,000 asset was a faint wet tire track and a small iridescent smear of oil on the gray concrete. My hand went to my pocket automatically. My fingers closed around the cool, heavy plastic of my key fob. I squeezed it, the panic rising in my throat like bile. If this were a professional theft, there would be shattered glass. There would be the screech of an alarm that surely someone would have heard. But the silence in the garage was absolute. The thief had a key. My stomach dropped, not with fear, but with a sudden, sickening realization. This was not a stranger. A stranger breaks a window. A stranger hotwires the ignition. Only a friend, or what passes for family, unlocks the door and drives away. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage that was heating my blood from the inside out. I called Luke first. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. Luke was probably in the shower or making coffee, blissfully unaware that his wife was standing in a parking garage about to commit a felony. I dialed the next number on my favorites list. Evelyn, my mother-in-law. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and airy, completely at odds with the dread pulling in my gut. "Good morning, Sienna," she chirped. "You are up early, Evelyn," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, flat and metallic. "Where is my car?" There was a pause. It was a small, hesitation-filled silence that told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke a word. "Oh, Sienna." Honestly, Evelyn sighed, the brightness dimming just a fraction, replaced by that patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being difficult. "You do not need to use that tone. It is not missing." My knuckles were white around my phone. "I am standing in my parking spot." "Evelyn," I said, enunciating every syllable. "The spot is empty. I'd have my key in my pocket." "Who has my car?" "Well, Mallory called last night," Evelyn said, her voice rushing now, trying to smooth over the jagged edges of the situation. She was in such a bind. Poor thing. Her transmission acted up again, and she had all these errands to run for the girls today. And she knew you usually take the light rail when the weather is nice, so I told her it would be fine. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You gave her my spare key. I gave Evelyn a spare key for emergencies. Emergencies meant I was in the hospital or the apartment was burning down. Emergencies did not mean her other daughter-in-law needed a luxury ride to run errands. She just needed it for a day or two. Sienna, Evelyn said, sounding defensive now. We are family. Family helps family. You were asleep, and I didn't want to wake you over something so trivial. Mallory promised to be careful. Trivial. She called grand theft auto-trivial. Evelyn, that car is not community property. I snapped, my professional veneer cracking. It is in my name. My insurance does not cover Mallory. If she crashes it, I am the one liable. You had no right to hand over my property to someone else without asking me. You are overreacting. Evelyn huffed. It is just a car. Sienna, you make good money. You have so much. And Mallory and Barrett are struggling right now. It is uncharitable of you to be so stingy about a piece of metal. Besides, she already has it. Just let her use it for the week and stop making a scene. It is not like she stole it. She took it without my permission, using a key you were not authorized to use. I said, my voice rising. That is the definition of stealing. Evelyn, tell her to bring it back. Now she's already busy. Sienna, do not be dramatic. We will talk later. The line went dead. She hung up on me. She actually hung up on me. I stood there staring at the phone screen, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights of the garage. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a level of entitlement that defied physics. They treated my boundaries like suggestions and my assets like a communal pot for the Cooper family to dip into whenever they felt the urge. Then a text message pinged. It was from Mallory. Hey, thanks for the loaner. Evelyn said it was cool. Needed for a few days to get the kids around while my piece of junk gets looked at. Don't worry, I'll put gas in it. No asking, no apology, just a statement of fact. Thanks for the loaner. As if she had done me a favor by taking my $70,000 vehicle off my hands. I looked at the time, 7:20 in the morning. I had a quarterly risk assessment meeting with the board at Redwood Meridian Fleet Works at 9:00. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be prepared. Instead, I was stranded in a parking garage watching my heart rate climb on my smartwatch. I had two choices. Choice A, I could do what I always did. I could call an Uber. I could go to work. I could swallow the anger, let it settle in my stomach like a stone, and deal with it later. I could let them win again. I could accept that in the Cooper family hierarchy, my property was less important than Mallory's convenience. I could listen to Luke later tonight tell me that his mom meant well and that Mallory was going through a hard time. Choice B, I could burn the bridge. I looked at the empty spot again. I thought about the 3 payments I had made. I thought about the smell of that leather. I thought about how hard I worked analyzing data, managing crisis, staying late, to ensure every single asset in my company's fleet was accounted for. If a driver in my fleet took a vehicle off route without authorization, I didn't ask them nicely to bring it back. I reported it stolen. I triggered the recovery protocols. Why was my personal life any different? Family helps family. That was Evelyn's weapon. She used it to bludgeon me into submission every time. But help is something you give freely. It is not something that is taken from you while you sleep. I took a deep breath, inhaling the damp, oily air of the garage. I closed my eyes for a second, visualizing the organizational chart of my life. Evelyn, Mark, Luke, Garrett, Mallory, they were all in the liabilities column. Today, I was balancing the ledger. I opened my phone again. I didn't call Luke. I didn't text Mallory back. I opened the keypad and dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm. Professional. I would like to report a vehicle theft, I said, my voice steady, cold as the concrete under my feet. It was taken from my residence at 130 South Tryon Street sometime between midnight and 7 in the morning. Do you have the license plate number? Ma'am, I recited it from memory. I gave the make, the model, the VN, which I had memorized the day I signed the papers. Do you know who took the vehicle? The dispatcher asked. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was the point of no return. Once I said the name, the police report would be filed. The polite fiction of a family misunderstanding would be over. The war would begin. Yes, I said. Her name is Mallory Cooper. She is my sister-in-law. She took the keys without my consent. Okay, we will send an officer out to take a statement. Stay where you are." I hung up. My hand was trembling again, but this time it was not from rage. It was from adrenaline. I had done it. I had actually done it. The phone in my hand buzzed again. A call was coming in. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken 2 Christmases ago. Mallory holding a glass of wine, looking slightly flushed and overly pleased with herself. I stared at the screen. The dispatcher had said an officer was on the way. I shouldn't answer. I should let it go to voicemail. I should wait for the law, but I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the arrogance one last time before reality crashed down on her. I slid the icon to answer and put the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mallory," I said. Sienna Mallory shouted, but she wasn't yelling in anger. She was laughing. The sound of wind rushing by filled the background. She was driving my car. She was driving my car with the windows down. Chill out with the text to Evelyn. Okay, you sound like such a control freak. I am doing you a favor. Really, that car needs to be driven, not just parked in a garage like a museum piece. The sound of her laughter grated against my eardrum. It was the sound of someone who had never faced a consequence in her entire adult life. "Bring the car back, Mallory," I said quietly. "Right now." "Or what?" She scoffed. "You'll tell Luke. You know he won't do anything. He knows family comes first. Just buy another one if you're so worried about the miles. You can afford it. Just buy another one." The entitlement was so pure, so distilled. It was almost impressive. I looked toward the entrance of the garage. I could see the reflection of blue lights flashing against the ramp walls. The patrol car was here. "I am not telling Luke," I said, watching the police cruiser pull into the garage, its lights sweeping over the empty concrete where my Independence used to sit. Mallory laughed again, revving the engine, my engine. I could hear the powerful purr of the turbocargo through the foam. "Whatever, Sienna. I will bring it back on Sunday, maybe Monday. Don't wait up." She hung up. The police officer stepped out of his car, adjusting his belt, walking toward me with a notepad in hand. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen now black. Mallory thought she was holding the steering wheel. She thought she was driving. She had no idea that she was just a passenger in a collision that had already happened. I put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the officer. The time for family meetings was over. It was time for a risk audit, and Mallory Cooper was about to come up significantly short. The officer who stepped out of the cruiser was young, with a high and tight haircut and a nameplate that read, "Officer Miller." He did not look like he was in the mood for domestic drama. He hitched up his belt, looked at the empty parking spot, then at me, and finally at the phone in my hand where the call had just ended. "Are you the owner of the vehicle?" he asked. His voice was flat, practicing the practiced detachment of someone who spent his mornings dealing with people on the worst days of their lives. "Yes," I said. I handed him my driver's license and the registration card I kept in my wallet. "My name is Sienna Cooper. The vehicle is a 2024 Obsidian black SUV. Officer Miller took the documents, glancing at them before handing them back. He pulled out a small notepad. "You stated on the call that a family member took the vehicle. Is that correct?" "My sister-in-law," I said, the title tasting like ash in my mouth. "Mallory Cooper, my mother-in-law, gave her a spare key without my knowledge or consent." Miller stopped writing and looked up, clicking his pen. "Ma'am, I need you to be very clear here. If your mother-in-law had access to a key and she gave it to this Mallory person, this falls into a gray area. Civil dispute versus criminal theft. Did you ever explicitly tell your mother-in-law she had permission to lend the car out?" "Never," I said firmly. The spare key was for emergencies only. Fire, flood, medical incapacitation, not for running errands. Miller sighed, shifting his weight. "Look, MS. Cooper, I can file a report for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. It is a felony in North Carolina, but I need to warn you about what happens next. If I put this in the system and a patrol unit spots that car, they are not going to ask her politely to pull over. They are going to perform a felony stop. Guns drawn, hands on the hood. Based on what you are telling me, You are about to put a family member in handcuffs. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" The question hung in the humid air of the garage. I hesitated. It was exactly 3 seconds of silence. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. I was not hesitating because I was afraid of the law. I was not hesitating because I felt bad for Mallory. I was hesitating because I ran the risk simulation in my head. I saw the fallout. Evelyn weeping at Sunday dinner. Mark calling me heartless. Luke looking at me with those sad, disappointed eyes, asking why I couldn't just be the bigger person. They would paint me as the villain. They would say I cared more about a machine than a human being. They would rewrite history to make me the aggressor and Mallory the victim of my corporate coldness. Then I looked at the oil stain on the concrete. I thought about the 3 payments. I thought about the disrespect in Mallory's voice, the sheer unadulterated entitlement. If I did not draw the line now, the line would never exist. "File it," I said. My voice did not shake. "I want the report. She has my property. I want it back." Officer Miller nodded, his demeanor shifting from mediator to enforcer. He tapped his body camera. It gave a soft chirp. "Okay, I am recording. State for the record that you are requesting criminal charges for the unauthorized use of my phone." Rang again. I looked down. It was Mallory again. Officer Miller saw the name on the screen. He held up a hand, stopping me. "Answer it. Put it on speaker. Do not tell her I am here. Just get her to admit she has the car and refuses to return it. Can you do that?" I nodded. I slid my thumb across the screen and tapped the speaker icon. "Mallory," I said. "Oh, good. You picked up." Mallory's voice filled the garage, echoing slightly off the concrete walls. She sounded annoyed, like I was the one inconveniencing her. "I just wanted to tell you that the gas light is on. I am not filling this thing up with premium. Cyanide, that is ridiculous. Regular is fine, right? Do not put regular gas in that car." "Mallory," I said, my teeth clenched so hard my jaw itched. "It is a turbo engine. You will ruin the injectors." "Where are you?" "I am around," she said vaguely. "God, you are so uptight. Listen, I found a receipt in the center console. You paid $70 for a detail. Must be nice to have money to burn. Meanwhile, Garrett and I are scraping by to pay for daycare." Officer Miller was watching me intensely, pointing to the phone, mouthing the word location. "Mallory, I am not asking you again," I said, injecting a layer of ice into my tone that I usually reserved for negligent vendors. "I can see the GPS tracker on my app. I know you are not running errands in the suburbs." It was a bluff. The dealership had offered the premium telematics package, and I had declined it, thinking the standard setup was enough. I had not activated the real-time tracking yet, but Mallory did not know that. There was a pause on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. "You are tracking me," she hissed. "That is creepy." "Cyanide, that is stalking." "You are in my stolen car," I countered. "That is not stalking. That is asset recovery. I see you near Statesville Avenue. Why are you near the industrial park?" "Mallory, there are no grocery stores there." The silence on the other end was heavy. I had guessed right, or rather I had startled her into a reaction. Statesville Avenue was a mix of old warehouses, auto body shops, and places you didn't go unless you were looking for something specific. "I am just meeting a friend," she stammered. Then her voice hardened again, defensive and nasty. "You know what? Stop watching me. It is weird. I will bring the car back when I'm done. When you are done with what I asked." "Whatever I want," she shouted. "Why do you care so much? It is just a car. It is insured, isn't it? If something happens to it, just buy another one. You have the money. You people always have the money." Officer Miller's eyebrows shot up. He looked at me, his eyes wide. The sentence hung there, vibrating in the air between us. Just buy another one. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete dehumanization of my labor. Every late night at the office, every missed weekend, every ulcer-inducing deadline, she reduced it all to a magic ATM machine that she felt entitled to withdraw from. She didn't see me as a person who worked for what she had. She saw me as a resource to be exploited. "Mallory," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "you have exactly one chance. Tell me where the car is, or what will you tell me? Roll up Cyanide." Click. She hung up. I stood there staring at the phone, my chest heaving. Officer Miller let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, writing furiously in his notebook, "that makes things easier. We have her admitting she has possession, admitting she knows you want it back, and refusing to return it. And that comment about buying another one, that goes to intent. It shows a disregard for the property owner's rights." He ripped a sheet off his notepad and handed it to me. "This is your case number," he said. "I am putting out a bolo. Be on the lookout for the vehicle right now. Since she mentioned Statesville Avenue, I will have the units in the North Division do a sweep of the warehouse district." "Thank you," I said, taking the paper. It felt flimsy, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "One more thing," Miller said, looking me in the eye. That woman sounded unstable and desperate. People who talk like that about money and insurance, they usually do not treat the vehicle well. If we find it, you need to prepare yourself. It might not be in the condition you left it." "I know," I said. "I work in fleet management. Officer, I know exactly what happens to assets when no one is responsible for them." Miller nodded and turned back to his cruiser. "I will call you as soon as we have a visual. Keep your phone on." He got into the car, the radio crackling to life as he called in the plate number. I watched him drive up the ramp and disappear into the daylight. I was alone in the garage again. My phone started vibrating. It was not a call this time. It was a barrage. Text from Luke. "Mom says you called the cops." "Sienna, tell me you didn't." Text from Evelyn. "Taking family matters to strangers is a sin." "Sienna, call off the police. You are destroying this family." Text from Garrett. "If Mallory gets arrested, I swear to God." "Sienna, I swiped them all away. I didn't block them. Not yet. I needed the evidence. I needed every threat, every guilt trip, every manipulation documented and time-stepped." Then a notification popped up from my banking app. "Transaction, alert purchase of $750, authorized at Quickstop Fuel Go 4401 Statesville, Evra." My blood ran cold. $75. That was a full tank. But Mallory had said she wasn't going to put premium in. She said she was broke, and the time stamp was right now, 2 minutes after she hung up on me. Why would she fill up a stolen car if she was just running errands? You put $10 in a Lona. You fill the tank if you are going on a long trip or if you are planning to run. But something else nagged at me. The location. Quick Stop Fuel Go. I knew that station. It was a truck stop. It was a place where 18-wheelers idled and cash transactions happened in the back of the lot. I tapped the notification, pulling up the map. It was deep in the industrial corridor, just like I had bluffed. But she wasn't leaving the area. She was fueling up inside it. I took a screenshot of the transaction. I took a screenshot of the texts from Luke and Evelyn. Then another message came through. It was from Mallory. "You just started something you don't understand. Hope your insurance is paid up." It was not a taunt this time. It was a threat. I stared at the words. "You just started something you don't understand." She was right. I didn't understand. Not yet. But I was about to. Because I wasn't just a pissed-off sister-in-law anymore. I was an auditor, and I was going to follow the paper trail until it led me to the bottom of whatever hole Cooper had dug for herself. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking sharp and hard on the concrete. I needed my laptop. I needed to pull the raw data. If Mallory thought she could outrun a woman who made a living predicting disasters, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in, pressing the button from my floor. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of the empty parking spot, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. The fear was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of the audit. Let the record show. I whispered to the empty elevator car. I gave her a chance. The call came at 3:14 in the afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet of fleet depreciation values, trying to force my brain to focus on the numbers, but my mind kept drifting back to the empty parking spot. When my phone buzzed and Officer Miller's name appeared on the screen, I answered on the first ring. "We found it." "M. Cooper," he said. There was no triumph in his voice. There was a hesitation, a heavy pause that professional men use when they have to deliver bad news without sounding emotional about it. "Where is it?" I asked. "Is it drivable?" "It is at South Line Impound," Miller said. And no, ma'am, I would not recommend driving it. You need to come down here. We need you to see this before we process it further. South Line Impound is a graveyard of bad decisions located on the grim edge of the city, where the asphalt is cracked and the fences are topped with razor wire. I took a ride share over my stomach, twisting into tighter knots with every mile. The driver tried to make small talk about the weather, about the humidity, but I just stared out the window, gripping my purse so hard the leather creaked. When we pulled up to the gate, Officer Miller was waiting for me. He looked hot and tired, sweat beating on his forehead under his cap. He didn't smile. He just nodded and motioned for me to follow him through the rows of wrecked sedans and shattered trucks. "It is over here in row G," he said. "I saw it from 50 St away, or rather I saw the corpse of it." My stomach dropped so hard I nearly stumbled. It was obsidian black. It had my license plate, but that was where the resemblance to the vehicle I had parked last night ended. The entire passenger side was caved in. It wasn't just a scratch. The metal was buckled deep, creating a jagged valley along the doors. A thick streak of yellow paint, the unmistakable safety yellow of a concrete ballard or a parking barrier, ran from the front headlight all the way to the rear wheel well. It looked like someone had tried to squeeze the car through a gap that was too narrow and just kept pushing on the gas. But that was not the worst part. The rear windshield was gone. It had not just shattered. It hung in a sad spiderweb curtain held together by the tint film with a gaping hole in the center. My hand flew to my mouth. I walked closer, my legs feeling heavy and numb. This was my milestone. This was my $70,000 achievement, and it looked like it had been chewed up and spit out by a monster. "I need you to open it," Sienna Miller said gently. "We need to document the interior." I fumbled for the spare key. I had brought my key, the one that had stayed in my pocket. I pressed the unlock button. The car chirped, a cheerful sound that felt obscene in the context of such violence. I pulled the driver's side door open. The smell hit me like a physical blow. 12 hours ago, this car had smelled of premium leather and that crisp factory fresh scent of new plastics. Now it smelled like a frat house basement after a 3-day bender. The air was thick with the stench of stale cigarette smoke, chemically sweet energy drinks, and cold, greasy fast food. I looked at the driver's seat. My pristine saddle brown leather was stained. There was a dark sticky puddle in the center of the seat, like a soda had been spilled and left to soak in. I looked at the center console. Right there on the brushed aluminum trim next to the gear shift was a burn mark. A cigarette burn, a small black crater in the perfect finish. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and sharp. I blinked them away. I would not cry. I refused to cry over metal and plastic. This was not sadness. This was a cold, hard fury solidifying in my chest. "It looks like a hit and run," Miller said, standing behind me. "The damage on the side suggests she sideswiped a stationary object at significant speed and didn't stop. But the back window is different. That looks intentional, like someone smashed it to get something in or out in a hurry." I leaned into the back, ignoring the smell. I looked at the cargo area. The carpeted floor of the trunk, which had never held anything heavier than a week of groceries, was torn. The plastic bumper guard was gouged with deep white scratches. Someone had dragged something heavy into this car. Heavy and sharp. This was not Aaron's. I whispered. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking again, but I forced my fingers to work. I dialed Luke. He answered on the third ring. His voice sounded thick, like he had been sleeping or hiding. "Sienna, look. Mom is really upset." I cut him off. "I am at the impound lot. Luke, the car is totaled." There was silence on the line, then a sigh. A long weary sigh that told me he still didn't get it. "Totaled, babe, come on. Mallory is a bad driver." "Sure, but the passenger side is crushed." "Luke," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. "The back window is smashed. The interior is trashed. There are cigarette burns on the console." Silence again. Then the pivot. The classic Cooper family pivot. "Okay, okay," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Look, we will fix it. I will talk to Garrett. We can work this out without the insurance companies, right? If we claim it, the rates will skyrocket. Just don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. It is just a car. We can get it detailed. Don't make it a big deal, I repeated, staring at the shattered glass. Please, Sienna, Luke begged. Mom is already having chest pains over the police report. Just come home. We will talk to Mallory. She feels terrible, I am sure. I hung up on him. He was useless. He was worse than useless. He was an accessory to my misery. I scrolled down to the call log and hit the number from Mallory. She answered immediately, almost as if she had been waiting for the other shoe to drop. But she snapped. I'm looking at my car. Mallory, I said. Silence. No gas. No apology. It drives, doesn't it? She said finally. The side is caved in. I said the window is smashed. You burned a hole in the console. So she said, and I could hear the shrug in her voice. It was an accident. I misjudged a turn. The window thing just happened. I don't know. Maybe a rock hit it. You were smoking in it, I said. I was stressed. She yelled. You called the cops on me. Sienna. Of course I needed a cigarette. God, you are so dramatic. You destroyed my car. I said, and then she said it. The line that would echo in my head for the rest of my life. The line that severed the last thread of obligation I felt toward these people. It is insured. Sienna, stop whining. If it is that bad, just buy another one. You have the money. Just buy another one and leave me alone. She hung up. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The sheer, breathtaking malice of it left me winded. She didn't care. She actually did not care. Officer Miller stepped closer. He had been listening. He didn't say anything about the call, but his expression had hardened. MS. Cooper, he said, there is something else you need to know. We pulled footage from a security camera near the entrance of the industrial park on Statesville Avenue. I looked at him. What time? 2:45 in the morning. He said 2 in the morning. Your vehicle was seen backed up to a loading bay at a warehouse off Carrion Way. Miller said, the quality is grainy, but we can clearly see 2 individuals loading boxes into the back. Heavy boxes. I looked back at the gouged bumper guard, the torn carpet. She wasn't running errands, I said, the realization settling over me like a cold blanket. She was moving cargo. Miller nodded. And given who she was with, Dylan Cross is not a guy you call to help you move furniture. We have reason to believe that vehicle was used to transport stolen high-value electronics. That is why the window is smashed. Maybe the lock stuck. Maybe they were in a rush. But they forced those boxes in. I felt a wave of Norser. My car, my symbol of success, had been turned into a mule for a thief. Detective Reynolds will be in touch. Miller said he handles the property crimes division. He is going to want the data from the car's computer, the telematics. I nodded. I can get that. Good. Miller said, look, MS. Cooper, I am going to have the car towed to the forensic lot instead of leaving it here. But you need to go home. Lock your doors. If Mallory and this Dylan guy think you have evidence of what they were moving, they might get desperate. I left the lot 10 minutes later. I didn't look back at the car. It wasn't mine anymore. It was a crime scene. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was deafening. Luke wasn't home. He was probably at his mother's house, strategizing on how to gaslight me into forgiving them. I locked the deadbolt. I engaged the security latch. I went to my home office and opened my laptop. I logged into the fleet management portal. My hands flew across the keyboard, pulling the raw data from the SUV's onboard system. The map populated on the screen. It was a jagged red line of chaos, part accelerations, panic braking. The car had been driven aggressively, angrily. I traced the route with my finger from my apartment to Evelyn's house, then to the industrial park. But then I saw it. There was a time stamp gap between 4:00 and 4:45 in the morning. The car had stopped. The engine had idled for 42 minutes. It wasn't at the warehouse. It wasn't at a gas station. I zoomed in on the map. The GPS pin hovered over a residential address in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. It was a small rundown house on the east side of the city, miles away from where Mallory lived, miles away from anything relevant. Why did she stop there? Why did she sit there for 45 minutes with the engine running in the middle of the night? I wrote the address down on a sticky note. 779 Oakwood Lane. My investigator brain kicked into gear. The sadness was gone. The shock was fading. Now I was just hunting. I picked up my phone to call the detective, but stopped. A notification banner slid across the top of my laptop screen. It was an email from the towing company confirming the intake of the vehicle. But right below it, a new email arrived. It was from my insurance company. Subject: claim initiation. Incident date yesterday. I hadn't called the insurance company yet. I clicked open the email. Dear Miss Cooper, thank you for contacting us regarding your vehicle accident. We have opened your claim for vandalism and accidental damage as described in your phone statement. My breath hitched. I hadn't called them. I grabbed my phone and dialed the claim adjuster's number listed in the email. The phone rang twice. This is Grant Holloway, Claims Department. Mr. Holloway, this is Sienna Cooper. I said, my voice tight. I am looking at an email saying I opened a claim. Yes, M. Cooper, Grant said, sounding confused. We spoke yesterday afternoon. You called to report that you had lent the vehicle to a relative and it was damaged in a parking lot. Vandalism. You said you didn't want to file a police report but needed the repairs covered. The room seemed to tilt. Mr. Holloway, I said, gripping the edge of my desk. I did not call you yesterday. I filed a police report this morning for grand theft auto. There was a long silence on the line. Ma'am, Grant said slowly, I have the recording of the call right here. The caller verified your social security number, your mother's maiden name, and your policy password. She said she was Sienna Cooper. Someone had stolen my identity, someone who knew my passwords, someone who knew my mother's maiden name. I looked at the sticky note with the address. I looked at the red line on the map. They weren't just using my car. They were becoming me. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the apartment. It was cool, blue, and clinical, the exact opposite of the chaotic heat radiating from my chest. I sat at my dining table, a glass of water untouched beside me, and did what I was paid to do. I stopped being a victim, and I started being an analyst. I pulled up the raw telematics data from the SUV. Most people think of their car as just a machine that gets them from point A to point B. In my industry, we know the truth. A modern vehicle is a rolling black box. It records every heartbeat of the engine, every shift of the gears, and every erratic decision the driver makes. The red line on the map told a story of panic. I traced the cursor along the route. At 2:12 in the morning, the vehicle left Evelyn's driveway. It didn't go to a 24-hour pharmacy. It didn't go to a grocery store. It headed straight for the industrial artery of the city, taking the back roads that cut through the old textile district. I looked at the velocity graph, 65 mph in a 35 zone, hard braking event at 219, rapid acceleration at 221. Whoever was driving Mallory was driving like she was running from something. Then the line stopped. I zoomed in. The GPS ping hovered over a massive gray rectangle on the satellite map, Carrion Yard. It was a logistics hub, a place of shipping containers and loading docks, usually dead quiet at night unless you had a gate code. The car sat there for 42 minutes. The engine remained idling. The rear hatch sensor was triggered 3 times. Open, close, open, close, open, close. I opened a second window on my screen and pulled up the transaction I had seen earlier, the gas station charge. I overlaid the timestamp. The gas station was 3 miles from Carrion Yard. She filled up after the stop at the yard. It made no sense. If you are just borrowing a car to run errands for the kids, you do not spend 42 minutes at a shipping depot at 3:00 in the morning. I needed to see the start of the trip. I needed to see the moment the car left Evelyn's possession. Then I remembered last Christmas I bought Evelyn and Mark a smart doorbell camera. Evelyn had complained about package thieves, and being the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had purchased the device, installed it, and set up the account because Evelyn is hopeless with technology. I had kept the administrative access on my phone to help her troubleshoot connection issues. I had never removed it. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I opened the app. The device was still online. I scrolled back through the timeline. Yesterday night, There were 3 motion events between midnight and 3:00 in the morning. I clicked the first one. Timestamp 2:05 in the morning. The video buffered for a second, then resolved into the grainy fisheye black and white of night vision. Evelyn was standing on her front porch. She was wearing her bathrobe, hugging it tight around her chest. She looked nervous. She kept glancing back at the front door, as if checking to make sure Mark hadn't woken up. A figure stepped into the frame. Mallory. She looked frantic. Her hair was messy, and she was wearing a baggy hoodie. She was talking fast, her hands waving in the air, but the audio was muffled by the wind. Then Evelyn reached into her pocket. The glint of silver was unmistakable even in the low light. My spare key. Evelyn handed it over. Mallory snatched it, not with gratitude, but with desperation. But then the motion sensor triggered a wider angle. Mallory wasn't alone. Standing at the bottom of the porch steps, just at the edge of the darkness where the porch light faded, was a man. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pacing like Mallory. He was standing with a terrifying stillness, watching the exchange. He wore a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, but as Mallory turned to run down the steps, he lifted his head slightly to look at the house. The infrared camera caught his face clearly for exactly 2 seconds. I froze the video. I pinched the screen to zoom in. I knew that face. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't a face I knew from family barbecues. It was a face I knew from a Beyond the Lookout bulletin I had circulated to my fleet managers 6 months ago. Dylan Cross. In the logistics world, Dylan Cross was a ghost story. He wasn't a petty thief. He was a specialist. He targeted high-value freight, pharmaceuticals, electronics, designer goods during the last mile of delivery. He was suspected of orchestrating cargo heists where pallets of merchandise just fell off the truck. He was dangerous, organized, and smart enough to never get caught holding the bag. And my mother-in-law had just handed him the keys to my car. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. This wasn't about Mallory needing a loan-up because her transmission blew. This was a job. They needed a car that didn't raise flags. Dylan's known vehicles were probably hot. Mallory's beat-up sedan was unreliable. But my SUV, it was invisible. It was a brand-new luxury vehicle registered to a corporate professional with an 800 credit score. It could roll into any warehouse district, any loading dock, and look like it belonged to a manager or an owner. I was the perfect cover. I was the clean skin. And Mallory had volunteered me. The rage that washed over me was different this time. It wasn't the hot, reactive anger of the morning. It was cold. It was calculating. They had put me in the middle of a federal crime. If the police had stopped that car while it was loaded with 42 minutes worth of stolen cargo, I would be the one answering questions in an interrogation room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I started exporting files. I saved the video clip of the key handover. I took a high-resolution screenshot of Dylan Cross's face. I compiled the telematics log highlighting the carrion yard stop and the G-force data from the reckless driving. I exported the text messages where Mallory admitted to having the car. I packaged it all into a single encrypted folder titled Case Evidence Cooper. I found the card Detective Reynolds had given me earlier. Well, Officer Miller had given me Reynolds' contact info, and I drafted an email. Subject Supplemental Evidence Case 4492 Dylan Cross Identification. I attached the files. I hit send. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a block number. MS. Fuber. The voice was deep growly. This is Detective Reynolds. Property crimes. I just opened your email. I am listening. Detective. I said, are you sure this is Dylan Cross? I am a risk operations manager for Redwood Meridian. I said, keeping my voice steady. We flagged him 6 months ago for a series of thefts involving our rally fleet. I know his face better than I know some of my cousins. Reynolds let out a low whistle. Okay, listen to me carefully. This changes the complexion of the case. We are not looking at a domestic unauthorized use anymore. If Cross is involved, your vehicle was likely used in a Class C felony theft ring. We have had eyes on a crew hitting warehouses near Statesville Avenue for weeks. Mallory said she was just moving boxes for a friend. I said, yeah. Reynolds scoffed. That is what they all say. Look, MS. Cooper, you need to sit tight. Do not contact Mallory. Do not contact your in-laws. If they know you have identified Cross, you could be in danger. These guys do not like loose ends. I understand. I said we are going to expedite the warrant for the vehicle search. Reynolds continued. We need to dust for prints and look for trace evidence in the cargo area before it gets compromised. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of vindication and terror. I was right. I was right about everything, but being right felt heavy. A notification popped up on my email again. This time it was from the impound lot. Southline Impound. Subject status update. Vehicle hold. I clicked it open. MS. Cooper, this email is to inform you that your vehicle VIN ending in 8842 has been placed on an indefinite investigative hold by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. No release or access is permitted until further notice. Please do not come to the lot. My heart sank. Investigative hold meant I couldn't get an adjuster out to see it. It meant I couldn't start the repair process. It meant I was stuck making payments on a $70,000 piece of evidence indefinitely. I needed to call my insurance company. I needed to get ahead of this before they denied the claim based on the police hold. I picked up my phone and dialed the direct line for the adjuster. Grant Holloway, the man I had spoken to briefly, or rather the man who claimed he had spoken to me. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. Grant Holloway claims Mr. Holloway. This is Sienna Cooper again. I said I need to update you on the status of my vehicle. The police have placed a hold on it. There was a pause on the line. The sound of typing. MS. Cooper, Grant said, his tone confused. I am looking at your file right now. I thought we cleared this up yesterday. Cleared what up? I asked, a prickle of unease running down my neck. The call yesterday. He said, you were the person claiming to be you called back at 4:45 in the afternoon. I frowned. I didn't call you at 4:45. I was at the impound lot talking to the police. Grant's voice dropped an octave. Ma'am, the caller verified your security questions. She provided your policy number. She told us to cancel the theft report. She said the car had been returned safely and the damage was minor, self-inflicted in your own driveway. She withdrew the claim. The room went silent. Someone had called my insurance company. Someone had impersonated me. Someone had tried to close the claim to stop the investigation before it started. And there was only one person who knew enough about me to answer those security questions. One person who knew my mother's maiden name because she was part of the family. One person who knew the make and model of my first car because she had heard Luke joke about it. Mr. Holloway, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need you to listen to me very carefully. That was not me, and you need to flag that recording for the police immediately. Why, Grant? Asked. Because, I said, staring at the frozen image of Evelyn Cooper handing my keys to a criminal. The person who called you is the same person who stole the car. Mr. Holloway, I said, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I need you to tell me exactly what she said, word for word. Grant Holloway cleared his throat on the other end of the line. The clicking of his keyboard stopped, replaced by the rustling of papers. He sounded uncomfortable, shifting from the role of a helpful adjuster to a suspicious investigator in real time. She called at 4:45 yesterday afternoon. He said she identified herself as Sienna Cooper. When I asked for verification, she provided your full date of birth, the last 4 digits of your social security number, and your mother's maiden name. She said the report of theft was a misunderstanding. She claimed she had lent the vehicle to a sister-in-law, that there was a dispute about the return time, and that the damage found was result of a minor backing accident in a private driveway. She requested we downgrade the claim to simple vandalism and liability, specifically asking to waive the police report requirement to expedite repairs. I felt the room temperature drop 10. Downgrade the claim, waive the police report. It was a strategic move. If the insurance company classified this as simple vandalism or an at-fault accident by an authorized driver, the police investigation would lose steam. Detective Reynolds would look at it as a civil matter. Mallory would avoid a felony charge. Dylan Cross would disappear back into the shadows. and I would be left with a higher premium, a total car, and a family that had successfully gaslit the entire legal system using my identity. "Mr. Holloway," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, hard rage. I did not make that call. I was standing in a police impound lot at 4:45. "If you process but claim change, you are aiding and abetting identity theft and insurance fraud." There was a heavy silence. "MS. Cooper," Grant said, his voice dropping to a serious formal register. "If you are stating that the caller was an imposter, we are moving into very dangerous territory. That is wire fraud. That is a federal offense. Are you prepared to go on record with our Special Investigations Unit?" "I am not just prepared," I said. "I am insisting on it. Flag the file. Lock it down. Send the recording to Detective Reynolds at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I want a copy of the audio sent to my legal counsel. I will transfer this to the SIU immediately." Grant said, "Do not touch the car. Do not authorize any repairs. We are freezing the asset." I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of the hunt. I was a risk manager. I spent my life looking for vulnerabilities in corporate systems. I never thought the biggest vulnerability in my life would be the people I invited to Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't wait. I sat down at my laptop and went to war. If they had my social and my mother's maiden name, they had everything. I opened 3 tabs in my browser. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I initiated a total credit freeze on all 3 bureaus. I set up a fraud alert. I logged into my bank accounts and changed every password to a randomized string of 20 characters. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything, linking it to an authenticator app rather than my phone number just in case they tried to swap my SIM card. I called my mobile carrier and set a verbal passphrase that was required before anyone could make changes to my account. I was building a digital fortress around myself. I was locking them out of my life 1 byte at a time. My phone buzzed. It was Detective Reynolds. "MS. Cooper," he said, his voice clipped and urgent. "We just got a flag from your insurance company." They sent over the audio file of the call. "It was not me," I said. "I know," Reynolds said. "We traced the call. It did not come from a cell phone. It came from a landline inside a business called Parcel Point on Tryon Street. It is a shipping and printing center about 2 miles from your mother-in-law's house." "I know the place," I said. "I have used them to notarize documents." We pulled the security footage from the store. Reynolds continued. "The call was placed at 4:45. We have a visual on the suspect." I held my breath. Was it Mallory? Had she been smart enough to leave her cell phone behind and use a pay phone? "It was a woman," Reynolds said. "Older, wearing a beige trench coat and a silk scarf. She paid for the phone usage and a fax service with a credit card." The world stopped. Beige trench coat, silk scarf. That was Evelyn's uniform. That was what she wore to church. That was what she wore to the country club. "We ran the credit card transaction," Reynolds said, delivering the final blow. "The card belongs to an Evelyn Cooper." I closed my eyes. It wasn't Mallory trying to save her own skin. It was Evelyn, my mother-in-law, the woman who bought me tea towels for Christmas, the woman who called me daughter. She had driven to a shipping center, stood in front of a surveillance camera, and impersonated me to commit a federal crime. She had used my personal data I had trusted her with to cover up a felony for her other daughter-in-law. This was not a mistake. This was not a panic move. This was a calculated, executed plan to sacrifice me, to save the family reputation. "She paid for the call," I whispered. "She did," Reynolds said. "And that makes her an accessory to wire fraud and identity theft. We are adding her to the warrant application." "MS. Cooper, I need to be frank. We are looking at a RICO predicate here. If this connects back to Dylan Cross, your family is not just dysfunctional. They are operating a criminal conspiracy. We are going to execute a search warrant on the warehouse and potentially the Cooper residence within the next 12 hours. Reynolds added, "Stay inside. Lock your doors. If they realize the insurance ploy failed, they are going to panic." I hung up and sat in the dark. The sound of the front door opening made me jump. Luke walked in. He looked terrible. His shirt was untucked, his eyes red-rimmed. He saw me sitting at the dining table in the dark, the laptop glow illuminating my face like a ghost. "Sienna," he started, his voice cracking. "We need to talk." I didn't turn to face him. I kept my eyes on the screen where the confirmation of my credit freeze was displayed. "Did you know?" I asked. Know what he asked, finding ignorance, but his voice was thin. "Did you know your mother impersonated me to the insurance company today?" I asked. "Did you know she committed wire fraud to cover up for Mallory?" Luke flinched. He walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, rubbing his face with his hands. "She didn't mean it like that. Sienna," he pleaded. "She's just terrified." Mallory was hysterical. She told Mom that if she gets arrested, Child Protective Services will take the kids. Mom was just trying to buy time. She thought if she could just get the insurance to cover it, we could pay you back privately. She was trying to save the family by destroying me. I stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floor, by using my social security number, by making me a party to fraud. That isn't saving the family, Luke. That is framing me. Garrett is losing his mind," Luke said, stepping toward me. "He says you are ruining his life over a car. He says you are vindictive." "And I vindictive?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "Your brother's wife used my car to transport stolen goods with a known felon. Your mother stole my identity, and you are standing here telling me that I am the problem." Luke froze. "Stolen goods. What are you talking about?" He didn't know about Dylan Cross. They hadn't told him that part. They had let him believe it was just a joy ride gone wrong. "Ask Mallory about the boxes, Luke," I said coldly. "Ask her about Carrion Yard at 2 in the morning. Ask her about Dylan Cross." Luke looked at me, confusion wearing with denial on his face. He wanted to believe I was crazy. It would be easier if I were crazy. I locked the credit cards. "Luke," I said, "the joint accounts, the savings, everything." I froze our credit. You did what he shouted. "Sienna, you can't just cut us off." I just did. I said, "Until this is resolved, financial silence is the only policy I have." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. The Sienna who cooked dinner and remembered birthdays was dead. She died in a parking garage at 7:10 this morning. "I am going to Mom's," Luke said, grabbing his keys. "You are out of control." He slammed the door behind him. I was alone. I walked to the door and engaged the deadbolt, then the chain. Then I wedged a heavy dining chair under the handle. My phone dinged. It was a text from Garrett. "We need to talk now." "Open the door." I looked at the time stamp. Now, bam. A heavy fist pounded on my front door. The wood shuddered in the frame. Then, then. Sienna Garrett's voice was muffled but furious through the wood. "I know you are in there. Open the damn door." I backed away, clutching my phone. Another text came through. "If you don't drop this, you are going to lose a lot more than a car. We know where you keep your files." I looked at the laptop. My files, my evidence. I didn't open the door. I retreated to the bedroom, dialing Detective Reynolds' number again, my thumb hovering over the call button. The pounding didn't stop. It just got rhythmic, like a drum beat of war. They weren't asking anymore. They were coming for me. The pounding on the door eventually stopped, but the assault on my life had only just begun. Garrett did not leave. He retreated to his car, parked just outside the complex gate, and began a digital siege. My phone vibrated against the hardwood table every 30 seconds, a relentless pulse of aggression. I did not answer, but I watched the voicemail transcriptions scroll across my screen. "Pick up the phone, Sienna. You are destroying Mallory's future over a piece of metal. We will not let you get away with this. You think you are the victim? Wait until people hear what you are really like. Drop the charges or I will make sure everyone knows you are mentally unstable." He was not apologizing. He was not negotiating. He was trying to break me. I sat in the dark sipping cold coffee and watched the threats pile up. I screenshot every single one. I organized them into subfolders. Harassment, intimidation, coercion. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a smear campaign. By 900 in the morning, the second wave hit. My social media notifications which usually consisted of LinkedIn job updates and the occasional recipe tag, suddenly exploded. I opened Instagram to find a barrage of comments on my photos. Selfish. Imagine ruining a mother's life because you are obsessed with money. Liar. They were Mallory's friends. Some were accounts I recognized when she drank wine with, mothers from her playgroup. Others were blank profiles clearly created 5 minutes ago. They were painting a narrative where I was the rich, heartless auntie prosecuting a struggling mother for a simple mistake. I did not delete the comments. I archived them. I logged the usernames. I traced the connections. Then the war moved from my personal life to my livelihood. At 10:15, my work email pinged with a high-priority flag. It was from Sarah Jenkins, the Vice President of Human Resources at Redwood Meridian Fleet Works. Subject urgent. Internal complaint investigation. My stomach tightened. I'd opened the email. MS. Cooper, we have received an anonymous whistleblower complaint alleging that you are utilizing proprietary company software and fleet tracking tools to stalk and harass private individuals. Given the sensitive nature of your access to risk management data, we are opening an immediate inquiry. Please report to my office via Zoom at 11. They had gone for the jugular. They knew my job was built on integrity and data security. If I was flagged for abusing surveillance tools, I would be fired for cause before lunch. I closed my eyes and took a breath. This was Garrett. It had to be. He knew what I did. He knew how to hurt me. I did not panic. I prepared. I spent the next 45 minutes compiling the defense dossier. I exported the police report number. I attached the email from Detective Reynolds confirming the criminal nature of the vehicle theft. I included the text messages from Mallory admitting she had the car. I wrote a concise, unemotional executive summary explaining that the vehicle in question was my personal property registered in my name and that any tracking was done via consumer-grade apps available to any owner, not company resources. At 11:00, I logged into the Zoom call. Sarah looked grave. Sienna, she said, the allegations are serious. Using Redwood assets to settle personal scores is, I interrupted her politely but firmly. Sarah, I have just sent you a file. The individual who filed this complaint is likely a suspect in an active felony investigation involving the theft of my personal vehicle. This is not a misuse of company resources. This is witness intimidation. I walked her through the timeline. I showed her the timestamp of the whistleblower email and overlaid it with the text threats from Garrett. By the end of the call, Sarah's expression had shifted from suspicion to sympathy. I see, she said, typing furiously. I will flag this complaint as malicious. And Sienna, if you need legal resources, let us know. We do not take kindly to people trying to weaponize our HR department. I survived the morning, but the adrenaline was starting to curdle into a deep, exhaustion-filled ache. At noon, Luke called. I debated not answering, but I needed to know where he stood. I needed to know if my husband was a partner or an enemy combatant. I answered, make it quick, Luke. I said, see, please. He sounded ragged. I am at Mom's. Garrett is out of control. He is talking about countersuing you for emotional distress. He says Mallory is suicidal. You have to stop this. Just drop the police report. We will pay you back for the car. I will take a loan from my 401k. Just end it. He was still doing it. He was asking me to pay the price for their crimes. Luke, I said, my voice dead calm. Your brother just tried to get me fired. He filed a false report with my company. But Luke stammered. No, he wouldn't do that. He did. I said, and your mother committed identity theft. This is not about the car and more. This is about them trying to destroy me to save themselves, and you are asking me to let them do it. I am trying to keep this family from exploding. Luke yelled. The family already exploded. Luke, I said, I am just the one walking through the rubble, and I need you to listen to me. If you pass on one more threat from Garrett, if you ask me to drop the charges one more time, I will add your name to the restraining order petition. There was a stunned silence on the other end. You would do that to me, he whispered. You are doing it to yourself. I said, you are either my husband or you are their accomplice. Pick a side. I hung up, I sat there staring at the phone. My heart was pounding, but my mind was snagging on a detail, a small technical detail that had been bothering me since I saw the video of the key handoff, the spare key. I had bought that SUV 3 months ago when I brought it home. I put the spare key in the kitchen drawer, the junk drawer where we kept batteries and take-out menus. I hadn't touched it since. Evelyn had it. Okay, but modern luxury cars have complex security systems. If a key fob isn't used for a certain period, some systems go into a deep sleep mode. Or if the main key is used exclusively, the rolling security codes can sometimes desynchronize. Yet, in the video, Mallory unlocked the car instantly. The lights flashed, the mirrors unfolded. It worked perfectly. It worked too perfectly. I picked up my phone and called the dealership. I asked for the service department. "Hi, this is Sienna Cooper," I said. "I bought a black SUV from you 3 months ago. I have a technical question. If a spare key sits in a drawer for 90 days, does it need to be rated?" The service manager paused. "Usually, no, but sometimes the battery can drain or the code rolls over." "Why do you ask?" "I am just curious." I said, "Can you check my service log? Was there any activity on my VIN regarding key fobs recently?" I heard him tapping on his keyboard. "Let me see," he muttered. Yes, here it is. We had a call 4 days ago. Tuesday, 4 days ago. That was 2 days before the theft. A gentleman called. The manager said he was your brother. He was having trouble with the spare fob not unlocking the doors consistently. He wanted to know the reset procedure to force a rank with the vehicle. We walked him through the manual sequence over the phone. My blood ran cold. My brother. I did not have a brother. What number did he call from? I asked. It is logged here as let me check, ending in 4492. That was Garrett's number. Garrett had the key 4 days ago. He was testing it. He was making sure it worked. This wasn't a spontaneous emergency because Mallory's car broke down. They had been planning to take the vehicle for days. But how did Garrett get the key? It was in my kitchen drawer in my apartment. Garrett hadn't been to my apartment in weeks. Only one person had been in my apartment every day. Look. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk. I opened my laptop again. I logged into our shared household email account, the one we used for utility bills and the mortgage. Luke often left his personal email logged in on the same browse session because he was lazy about security. I switched accounts. I went to the sent folder. I scrolled back 4 days. There it was. A short, innocent-looking email with no subject line. Sent to Garrett. I clicked it. The text was brief. Just 2 sentences that shattered 5 years of marriage. Mom has the spare now. I grabbed it while Sienna was in the shower. Don't let Sienna know. I stared at the screen. The letter seemed to float, disconnecting from meaning before slamming back into focus. I grabbed it while Sienna was in the shower. Luke hadn't just covered for them after the fact. He hadn't just been a passive coward. He was the supplier. He had stolen the key from our own kitchen, hidden it, and smuggled it to his mother so that Garrett and Mallory could use my car for their errands. He knew the whole time. When I stood in the parking garage screaming, when I called him in a panic, when he told me to calm down, he knew exactly where the car was. He had helped them steal it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The part of me that loved Luke Cooper died right there in that chair. I hit forward. I typed in Detective Reynolds's email address. Subject: supplemental evidence, conspiracy and premeditation. Message: please see the attached email correspondence between Luke Cooper and Garrett Cooper proving premeditated theft of the key fob 4 days prior to the incident. Also included is a statement from the dealership confirming Garrett Cooper accessed technical support to prepare the stolen key. I hit send. I watched the progress bar zip across the top of the screen. Message sent. I closed the laptop. I was done. I was absolutely done. My phone rang. It was Detective Reynolds. He must have seen the email come through instantly. I picked up. Detective, I just sent you MS. Cooper, star. Reynolds cut me off. His voice was urgent, buzzing with kinetic energy. We got the email. It is gold. But that is not why I'm calling. I waited, my hand gripping the phone. We just got a ping, Reynolds said. Not from the car, from Mallory's cell phone. She turned it back on. Where is she? I asked. She is at a motel off Interstate 85. Reynolds said, the Starlight Motor Inn. And MS. Cooper. She is not alone. We have a visual on a second vehicle in the parking lot. A rental van registered to Dillon Cross. They are together, I whispered. We are rolling on them now. Reynolds said, SWAT is taking the lead because of the cargo involvement. I need you to stay by your phone. When we hit that room, we are going to need you to verify the property immediately. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, sirens were wailing. Somewhere out there, my husband was probably realizing that his email had just incriminated his entire family. And somewhere in a cheap motel room, Mallory was about to realize that just buy another one was the most expensive sentence she ever spoke. I waited for the fire to burn them down. The takedown happened on Interstate 85, just past the Freedom Drive exit where the highway widens into a concrete river of tail lights. It was not the cinematic crash of metal and fire that movies promise. It was procedural. It was precise. And for Mallory Cooper, it was the end of the world. I was sitting in the plastic chair of the precinct waiting room when Detective Reynolds came out to get me. The fluorescent lights hummed with a head-inducing frequency. I had been there for an hour, signing supplemental statements regarding the key for unauthorized access. We got them, Reynolds said. His voice was flat, the adrenaline of the chase already fading into the paperwork of the arrest. Is she okay? I asked. It was a reflex, a ghost of the family instinct I was trying to kill physically. Yes, Reynolds said, leading me down the hallway toward the observation rooms. Legally, she is in a crater. We stopped a gray rental sedan, not your SUV. Your SUV is still an evidence. This was a secondary vehicle. Dillon Cross was driving. Was, I repeated, catching the past tense. He bailed, Reynolds admitted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, stopped the car on the shoulder, jumped the guard rail, and disappeared into the woods near the water treatment plant. K9 units are tracking him, but he had a head start. He is a ghost, but he left something behind. He pointed to the heavy steel door of interrogation room B. He left Mallory. I looked through the one-way glass. Mallory was not sitting in the defiance she had shown me over the phone. She was crumpled. She was wearing leggings and an oversized sweatshirt that looked expensive but was now stained with something dark coffee, maybe or mud from the arrest. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in jagged black rivers. She was shaking so hard the handcuffs rattled against the table. She didn't ask for a lawyer, Reynolds said quietly, standing beside me. She didn't ask for her husband. She asked for you. The me? I asked, watching her wipe her nose on her shoulder. She thinks you can undo this, Reynolds said. She keeps saying it is a family misunderstanding. She thinks if you just walk in there and tell us it is okay, we will let her go home. I felt a cold tightness in my chest. She still didn't get it. She thought the law was like Evelyn, something she could manipulate with tears and a sober story. I watched as Reynolds opened the door and stepped inside. I stayed behind the glass. The audio feed crackled to life in the small speaker mounted on the wall. Mallory looked up, her eyes wide and desperate. Where is Sienna? She demanded. Her voice was shrill, bordering on hysteria. I told the officer to call her. She will explain everything. This is ridiculous, MS. Cooper, Reynolds said, sitting down and opening a thick file folder. Sienna Cooper is not here to help you. She is the complainant. She is the victim. And right now, you are looking at charges for possession of stolen property, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and conspiracy. No, Mallory screamed, slamming her hands on the table. It was a loan. My mother-in-law gave me the key. Ask Evelyn. She gave it to me. We know Evelyn gave you the key, Reynolds said calmly. We also know your husband, Garrett, called the dealership 4 days ago to reset the fob. That is premeditation. Mallory, that is not a spontaneous loan. That is a plan. Mallory froze. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She didn't know we had the dealership logs. And Sienna is just jealous. Mallory pivoted, desperate for a foothold. She has always hated me because I have kids, and she has a career. She is making this up to humiliate me. She is vindictive." Reynolds didn't argue. He just reached into the folder and pulled out a stack of paper. He slid it across the table. "These are the text messages you sent her." Reynolds said specifically, "The one where you told her to just buy another car. And this," he tapped a USB drive, "is the recording of the call where you admitted to having the vehicle and refusing to return it." Mallory stared at the papers. "And this," Reynolds continued, pulling out a map printed on glossy paper, "is the GPS track of Sienna's SUV. It shows you at Carrion Yard at 2 in the morning. I was just running errands." Mallory shrilled. "At a shipping container depot." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. For 42 minutes, Mallory looked around the room, her eyes darting to the corners as if looking for an exit. "I was helping a friend move." Reynolds sighed. He signaled to the mirror to me and then pressed a button on his laptop. He turned the screen around so Mallory could see it. It was the grainy security footage from the warehouse. I had seen the still images, but the video was worse. It showed the back of my beautiful, pristine SUV open. It showed Dylan Cross, tall, efficient, wearing gloves, shoving heavy cardboard boxes into the cargo bay. And it showed Mallory struggling with a smaller box, pushing it into the back seat, scratching the leather I had paid extra for. "I was just the driver," Mallory whispered. Her defiance broke. The tears started again. Real tears this time, fueled by terror. Dylan said he just needed a ride. He said the boxes were merchandise. Merchandise, Reynolds pressed, "influencer stuff." Mallory sobbed. "He told me it was promo gear for influencers, high-end makeup, handbags. He said if I helped him move it, he would give me a cut. We need the money." "Okay." Darrett lost his job 2 months ago and didn't tell anyone. "We are broke." I stood behind the glass, stunned. Darrett lost his job. That was why they were so desperate. That was why they needed money. And instead of asking for help, they decided to strip my life. "Those boxes were not makeup," Reynolds said, his voice hard. "They contained high-performance graphics cards and stolen iPhones. Batch number 489 Alpha stolen from a distribution center in Raleigh 3 days ago. That is federal property." "Mallory, you were transporting $20,000 worth of stolen electronics." Mallory went pale. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Let's talk about the window," Reynolds said, leaning forward. "Why is the rear window of the SUV smashed?" Mallory flinched. She looked down at her hands. "It was an accident." Reynolds slammed his hand on the table. "Don't lie to me." "Mallory, the forensic report shows the glass was broken from the outside in the center. We panicked," she blurted out. "We were at the drop-off point. The trunk latch jammed. It wouldn't open. Dylan saw a patrol car turning the corner down the block. He grabbed a tire iron and smashed the window to get the boxes out fast. He said we couldn't be caught with the inventory." She covered her mouth, realizing what she had just said. She had just admitted to destroying evidence to evade police detection. She had just admitted to knowing the inventory was illicit enough to warrant smashing a window to hide it. "So you knew it was illegal," Reynolds said, writing it down. "You knew you had to hide it." Mallory put her head in her hands and wailed. It was a sound of pure misery, the sound of a woman watching her life dissolve. "Look," Reynolds said, his voice softening just a fraction, playing the good cop. "Dylan is gone. He left you holding the bag. He is halfway to the state line by now. You are the one sitting here. You are the one facing the charges. And let's not forget the insurance fraud." Mallory looked up, confused. "What insurance fraud?" "Your mother-in-law," Reynolds said. "Evelyn Cooper. She impersonated Sienna on a call to the insurance company to try and cover this up. That is wire fraud. That is identity theft. And since it was done to benefit you, that makes you a co-conspirator." Mallory's face went slack. "Mom did what?" "She tried to fix it," Reynolds said. "And now she is going to be arrested, too." Unless what?" Mallory whispered. "Unless you give us everything," Reynolds said. "You tell us where Dylan was taking the rest of the shipment. You tell us who the buyer is, and you tell us exactly who in your family knew about this plan. Because right now, Sienna Cooper has provided us with emails from your husband and your brother-in-law that look very incriminating. Mallory went still. The sobbing stopped. A strange look crossed her face. It wasn't fear anymore. It was malice. It was the look of a drowning person deciding to pull everyone else down with them. Sienna gave you emails. She asked quietly. She is cooperating fully. Reynolds said she is protecting herself. Mallory let out a short, bitter laugh. Protecting herself. Of course she is. Sienna. Perfect Sienna with her perfect job and her perfect credit score. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing the mascara further. She thinks she is one, doesn't she? Mallory said, her voice dripping with venom. She thinks she is the only one with secrets. Reynolds paused. He sensed the shift. What do you mean? Mallory leaned back in the chair, the handcuffs clicking against the metal table. You want to know about the family? She asked, her eyes glittering. You want to know who knew what? Fine. I will tell you. I will tell you about Dylan. I will tell you about the boxes. She paused, looking directly at the mirror as if she knew I was standing right there. But you should ask Sienna if she knows where her husband really goes on Tuesday nights. She said. Reynolds frowned. We are talking about the car. Mallory. No, Mallory said, shaking her head. We are talking about why Luke helped us. We are talking about leverage. You think Luke gave me the key because he loves his brother. She laughed again, and it was an ugly, jagged sound. He gave me the key because I found something on his phone. Mallory said, I found the emails he didn't delete. The ones from the offshore accounts. The ones from the other life he is living. While Sienna is busy staring at her spreadsheets, I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the counter in the observation room. Luke offshore accounts leverage. Mallory looked at Reynolds, a twisted smile playing on her lips. Sienna thinks she is the victim, she said softly. But she's just the bank and Luke. Luke has been making withdrawals for a long time. Reynolds stared at her for a moment, then stood up. He walked to the door and stepped out into the hallway where I was standing. The hallway felt cold. The hum of the light seemed louder. Reynolds looked at me. His expression was unreadable, professional, but there was a flicker of pity in his eyes that made my stomach turn. MS. Cooper, he said. I looked at him. I couldn't speak. She is ready to cut a deal. Reynolds said she is going to give us Dylan, but he glanced back at the door. She claims she has information regarding your husband, he said carefully. She claims it pertains to financial crimes that predate the vehicle theft. She claims this is why your husband facilitated the access to the key. He was being blackmailed. I stood there paralyzed. I thought Luke was weak. I thought he was a coward who couldn't say no to his mother. I thought he stole the key to keep the peace. But Mallory was saying he stole the key to keep a secret. Do you want us to pursue that line of questioning? Reynolds asked. Do you want to hear what she knows about Luke? I looked at the one-way glass. I looked at Mallory, who was staring at the mirror with a look of pure triumphant hate. She had lost the car. She had lost her freedom. But she had one grenade left, and she had just pulled the pin. I took a deep breath. I remembered the text message I had sent to Luke. Pick a side. It turned out he had picked his side a long time ago. Ask her, I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Ask her everything. Reynolds nodded and turned back to the door. I watched him walk back into the room. I saw him sit down. I saw Mallory lean forward, her lips moving, spilling the poison that would kill whatever was left of my life. And I stood there and listened. I gave them exactly 30 minutes. I chose the venue carefully. It was a coffee shop on South Tryon Street, right in the middle of the banking district. It was crowded, loud with the hiss of espresso machines, and populated by people in suits who would not appreciate a scene. This was my turf. If the Coopers wanted to scream, they would have to do it in front of a dozen witnesses. If they wanted to cry, they would have to do it while a barrister called out latte orders. I arrived 5 minutes early. I sat at a high-top table near the door, my back to the wall, watching the entrance. I did not order a drink. This was not a social call. This was a deposition. Even if they did not know it yet, they arrived together, a phalanx of dysfunction. Garrett looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, his eyes sunken and frantic. Evelyn was wearing large sunglasses indoors, clutching her purse like a shield. Mark trailed behind them, looking at his shoes. And Luke, my husband, he walked with them, not towards me. He was part of their unit, not ours. That visual separation told me more than any marriage counselor ever could. They pulled up chairs. Garrett didn't wait for pleasantries. He slammed a piece of paper onto the table. "Sign it," he said. His voice was a harsh whisper. I looked at the paper. It was handwritten on a sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was jerky, frantic. "I, Sienna Cooper, hereby state that I gave Mallory Cooper full permission to use my vehicle on the dates in question. The report of theft was a misunderstanding due to a lack of communication." I looked up at Garrett. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the desperation radiating off him like heat. "You want me to commit perjury?" I said. My voice was calm, distinct. "You want me to sign a false affidavit?" "It is not perjury," Sienna, Garrett hissed. "It is clarifying the narrative. If you sign this, the DA drops the unauthorized use charge. Mallory comes home. She can plead out the possession charge to a misdemeanor if the car issue goes away. You just have to say you forgot. Say you told Mom it was okay and forgot." "And the insurance fraud?" I asked. "What about the call your mother made pretending to be me?" Evelyn flinched behind her sunglasses. She reached out, trying to touch my hand. I pulled back. "See, please," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "I was just trying to help. I didn't want you to be burdened with the deductible. I thought if I handled it, it would all just go away. You used my Social Security number." "Evelyn," I said, "that is a federal crime." "We can fix it," Garrett interrupted, tapping the paper. "Just sign this. We will pay you back for the car. I promise. I will write you a promissory note right now. Put any number you want on it. 80,000, 90,000. Just write the number and I will pay it." I looked at him with genuine pity. He was talking about money like it was monopoly cash. He didn't have a job. Mallory was facing felony charges. They were drowning, and he was offering to buy me a yacht. "Garrett," I said, "you cannot afford a cup of coffee right now. How are you going to pay me $90,000? "I will find a way," he snapped. "But you have to sign this. If Mallory goes to prison, my kids lose their mother. Do you want that on your conscience?" The emotional blackmail, right on schedule. I leaned forward. "Let me explain to you what happens if I sign this paper. The moment I submit this to the district attorney, I am admitting to filing a false police report. That is a crime. Then the insurance company will see it. They will revoke my claim because I lied about the theft. They will sue me for the investigation costs. I will lose my job because I work in risk management and I will have a record of fraud. I will lose my security clearance. I will lose my career." I looked at each of them. "You are asking me to set myself on fire so Mallory doesn't have to face the consequences of her own actions." Evelyn took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and swollen. "But you can take it, Sienna," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Excuse me," I asked. "You are strong," Evelyn said, wiping her eyes. "You are so smart. You have resources. You have lawyers. You have savings. If you take the blame, you can survive it. You will bounce back. You always do. But Mallory is fragile. She will break in prison. She won't survive this. We are just asking you to carry the load because you are the only one who can." I sat back, stunned. There it was. The naked, ugly truth of my place in this family. They didn't hate me. It was worse than that. They viewed me as a utility. I was the structural support beam that they felt entitled to drill into because I was sturdy. My competence was not a virtue to them. It was a justification for their abuse because I was strong. It was acceptable to crush me. I looked at Luke. He had been silent this whole time, staring at the table. "Is that what you think?" "Luke," I asked, "do you think I should destroy my life because I'm strong enough to take it?" Luke looked up. He looked miserable. He looked like a man who was watching two trains collide and praying he wouldn't get hit by the shrapnel. "Sienna, look," he said, his voice pleading. "We can work this out. Maybe you don't have to say you lied. Maybe we can just say it was a miscommunication. I can talk to the insurance guys. I can explain that Mom was just confused. We can make this go away without ruining anyone. Just drop the charges, please." For the family, I repeated. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a print out of the email I had forwarded to Detective Reynolds the day before. I unfolded it and slid it across the table to Luke. "Read it," I said. Luke looked down. He read the timestamp. He read the sender. He read the recipient. And then he read the message. "Mom has the spare now. I grabbed it while Sienna was in the shower. Don't let Sienna know." The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. Garrett leaned over and read it. He froze. "You sent this to the police." Luke whispered, looking at me with horror. "I did. I said yesterday." "Why?" Luke asked, his voice cracking. "Why would you do that? I am your husband." "Because you stole from me." "Luke," I said, "you didn't just cover for them. You stole the key from our kitchen. You waited until I was naked and vulnerable in the shower, and you stole my property to give to your mother so she could give it to your brother." Garrett looked at Luke, then at me. "You gave them this?" Garrett asked, pointing at the paper. "This proves premeditation. This proves conspiracy. You just handed the police the nails from Mallory's coffin." I handed them the truth. I said. Mark, my father-in-law, spoke for the first time. He had been sitting with his arms crossed, looking angry now. He looked furious. "You are a cold woman, Sienna." He spat. I turned to him, and I called, "You people stole my car. You destroyed it. You tried to frame me for fraud. We didn't think she would get caught." Mark shouted, and then immediately lowered his voice as heads turned at the nearby tables. He leaned in, his face red. "We knew Mallory was doing some running around. We knew she was moving some things for cash. We didn't know the details. We just knew she needed a clean car for one night to make some money so they wouldn't lose their house. We were trying to help them survive." I stared at him. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew she was working with criminals. You knew she was moving illicit goods. We didn't know it was stolen electronics." Mark defended, though his defense was weak. "We thought it was under-the-table stuff. Gray market. We didn't think it was this serious. We just thought if she used your car, the cops wouldn't look twice. And you have so many cars in your fleet. We figured you wouldn't even notice the miles." I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I looked down at them. My husband, my in-laws, they were not evil masterminds. They were something far more dangerous. They were reckless, entitled people who believed that their needs justified any violation of my rights. They had bet my entire life, my credit, my job, my freedom on a gamble to make quick cash. And now that they had lost, they expected me to pay the debt. "I am done," I said. Sit down." Garrett commanded, standing up to block me. "You are not leaving until we fix this." I looked him in the eye. "Garrett," I said, "if you do not move out of my way, I will call Officer Miller. He is on speed dial, and unlike your wife, I do not make empty threats." Garrett hesitated. He looked at the paper on the table, the evidence of his brother's betrayal. He stepped aside. I picked up my bag. I looked at Luke one last time. "I filed for a restraining order this morning," I said. "It covers me, my workplace, and my bank accounts. If any of you contact me again for any reason other than through a lawyer, you will be arrested for violation of a court order." Luke reached out. "Sienna, baby, please." I was being blackmailed. Mallory found the emails she was going to tell you about. I held up a hand. "I know, Luke." I said. "I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the money you have been siphoning." Mallory told the police everything. Luke's mouth fell open. The devastation on his face was absolute. He realized then that his sacrifice had been for nothing. He had sold me out to save his secret, and Mallory had burned him anyway, just to spite me. "There is nothing left to say," I said. "From this moment on, the only thing that speaks for me is the police report and the court." I turned and walked out. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright, blinding sunlight of South Tryon Street. The humidity hit me thick and heavy, but for the first time in 3 days, I felt light. I had cut the anchor. I was drifting, but at least I wasn't sinking with them. I reached into my pocket to grab my sunglasses. My phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from the Mecklenburg County Court portal. I had signed up for alerts on the case file. Case update, defense motion filed. I stopped on the sidewalk. People flew around me, annoyed at the obstruction, but I didn't move. I opened the notification. Document title Affidavit of Permissive Use. Submitted by the attorney for Mallory Cooper. I frowned. I hadn't signed anything. I had just refused to sign Garrett's handwritten scroll 5 minutes ago. I clicked the link to view the document. It was a PDF. It wasn't the handwritten note from the coffee shop. It was a formal typed legal document. I, Sienna Cooper, attest that I granted permission. I scrolled to the bottom. There on the signature line was my name, Sienna Cooper. It was signed in blue ink. It looked exactly like my signature. It had the loop on the S, the sharp cross on the T. It was a perfect replica of the signature I used on checks, on contracts, on my marriage license. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. They didn't just want me to sign it. They had already forged it. They had come to the coffee shop to get me to agree to a lie they had already told the court. And the time stamp on the filing was 900 this morning. While I was getting dressed, while I was driving here, they had already submitted the forgery. I looked back at the coffee shop window. I could see them through the glass. Luke was with his head in his hands. Evelyn was weeping, but Garrett was on his phone and he was smiling. He thought he had beaten me. He thought that by filing the paper before I could object, he had created a legal reality that I would have to fight to undo. He thought I would be too scared of the perjury trap to deny the signature. I dialed Detective Reynolds. "Detective," I said as soon as he picked up MS. "Cooper, they just filed a forged affidavit in my name," I said, watching Garrett through the glass. "And I know exactly where they got the sample for my signature. Where Reynolds asked my marriage license," I said, my voice cold as ice. "My husband gave them that, too." The Mecklenburg County Courthouse smelled of industrial floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a smell I associated with traffic tickets and jury duty, but today it smelled like war. I sat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecutor's table. My posture was perfect. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I wore for board meetings when I had to deliver bad news about quarterly projections. I was not here as a sister-in-law. I was here as the plaintiff. Mallory sat at the defense table. She was not wearing the stained sweatshirt from the interrogation room. She was wearing a modest navy dress and a cardigan, clearly chosen by her lawyer to soften her image, but her face betrayed her. She didn't look remorseful. She looked annoyed. She glanced back at me, her eyes narrowing, treating me like a heckler who had interrupted her performance behind me. Garrett sat on the wooden bench. He was vibrating with tension. His eyes were red-rimmed, his leg bouncing up and down in a nervous rhythm that shook the entire bench. Luke was next to him, staring at the floor, looking like a man who wished he could dissolve into the linoleum. The hearing was technically a bail review and preliminary evidentiary motion, but because of the complexity of the charges, grand theft, conspiracy, possession of stolen goods, the assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named MS. Vance, was laying out the foundation to deny bail. "Your Honor, MS." Vance said, standing at the podium. "The state argues that the defendant Mallory Cooper presents a significant flight risk and a danger to the community. We have established a pattern of calculated deception." She began the recitation. It was the greatest hits album of my investigation. Exhibit A, the telematics log showing the vehicle at Carrying Yard for 42 minutes. Exhibit B, the security footage of the key exchange between Evelyn Cooper and the defendant. Exhibit C, the text messages from the defendant to the victim admitting possession of the vehicle. Exhibit D, the forensic report on the smashed rear window and the traces of industrial packing material found in the cargo bay. It was damning. It was precise. It built a cage around Mallory bar by bar. Mallory's lawyer, a court-appointed attorney named Mr. Sterling, who looked overworked and undercaffeinated, stood up. He adjusted his tie, looking weary. "Your Honor," he began, his voice practiced, but lacking conviction. "The defense acknowledges that MS. Cooper was in possession of the vehicle. However, the context is being manipulated. This was not a theft. This was a family dispute that spiraled out of control. MS. Cooper believed she had permission to use the car." He paused, glancing back at Garrett, who nodded frantically. "In fact, Mr. Sterling continued, reaching into his briefcase. "We have new evidence to submit, a document that clarifies the nature of this transaction." He pulled out a single sheet of paper. MS. Vance frowned. "This was not shared in discovery," she noted. "It was located this morning." "Your Honor." "Mr. Sterling said it is an affidavit signed by the vehicle owner, Sienna Cooper, dated 3 days prior to the incident." He handed the document to the bailiff who walked it to the judge. A copy was handed to MS. Lance. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was it, the forgery I had seen online. The judge, a stern man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, read the document in silence. MS. Vance looked at the paper, then turned to look at me, her eyebrows knit together in confusion. "Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "As you can see, the affidavit states clearly, I, Sienna Cooper, grant Mallory Cooper permission to use my 2024 SUV for the period of 3 days for personal errands. It is signed and dated. This nullifies the unauthorized use charge. If she had permission, there is no theft." The courtroom went silent. Luke turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were wide, pleading, confused. He looked like he wanted to ask, Did you actually sign it to save her?" For a second I saw hope in his eyes. He wanted it to be true. He wanted me to be the savior who had simply forgotten so his family could go back to being innocent victims of a misunderstanding. Mallory turned around. She didn't hide it this time. She smirked. It was a small triumphant curl of her lip. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought I would be too afraid of a perjury trap to deny the signature in open court. I did not panic. I did not gasp. I simply tapped MS. Vance on the shoulder. She leaned back over the railing. "It is a forgery," I whispered, my voice low and steady. "And I can prove it right now." MS. Vance nodded. She stood up. "Your Honor, the state disputes the authenticity of this document. The victim is present and prepared to testify regarding its origin." The judge looked over his glasses. MS. Cooper, please take the stand. I walked to the witness box. I swore the oath. I sat down, smoothing my skirt. I looked directly at Mallory. Her smirk faltered. MS. Cooper. "Mr. Sterling asked, holding up the paper, is this your signature?" "It looks like my signature," I said clearly. "In fact, it is a perfect replica of my signature." "So you signed it?" I said. "I did not. That signature is identical down to the pixel to the signature on my marriage license from 5 years ago. It is a trace, Mr." Sterling scoffed. "That is a convenient accusation." "Do you have proof?" "I do," I said. I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I am a creature of habit. When I sign legal documents, I use a specific blue gel pen. The signature on my marriage license was signed with a black ballpoint pen provided by the county clerk. If you look at the ink density on that document, you will see it is a scan. Furthermore, the date on that affidavit is last Monday." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. "Last Monday, at the time this document was allegedly signed, I was in a Zoom meeting with the Vice President of Human Resources at Redwood Meridian Fleet Works. I have the meeting logs, the IP address of my login, which shows I was at my office, and a sworn statement from my VP confirming I was on camera for 2 hours. I could not have signed a physical paper in my kitchen for Garrett Cooper, as the defense claims." Barrett let out a choked sound from the gallery, and I continued, looking at Luke, who was now pale as a sheet. "There is a pattern of identity theft in this family." MS. Vance stood up. "Your Honor, the state calls Grant Holloway, senior claims adjuster, to the stand." I stepped down. Grant took the stand. He looked nervous but professional. "Mr. Holloway, MS." Vance asked, "Did you receive a call regarding the vehicle in question?" "Yes," Grant said on Wednesday at 4:45 in the afternoon. "A woman identifying herself as Sienna Cooper called to cancel the theft claim." "Was it Sienna Cooper number?" Grant said. "We traced the call to a parcel point shipping center. The surveillance footage shows an older woman identified by police as Evelyn Cooper making the call. She used Sienna Cooper's social security number and policy password to attempt to close the investigation." The courtroom began to murmur. The narrative was shifting. It wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was a conspiracy. The judge looked at the defense table. His expression was thunderous. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice dangerously low, "did you knowingly submit a forged document to this court, Mr.?" Sterling looked horrified. He turned to Mallory. "You told me she signed this. You told me this was real." "She did sign it," Mallory shouted, standing up. "She is lying. She always lies. She is just trying to punish me." "Sit down, M. Cooper," the judge barked. Mallory didn't sit. She was unraveling. The walls were closing in, and her strategy of gaslighting and forgery had collapsed under the weight of simple, hard data. "She is doing this because she hates us," Mallory screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She thinks she is better than us, just because she has a job, just because she has money, MS." "Cooper, silence," the judge ordered. "It is just a car." Mallory shrieked, her voice cracking. "Look at her. She is sitting there in her expensive suit. She has money. She could have just bought another one. Why do you have to ruin my life over a stupid car when you could just buy another one?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the echo of the phrase she had said to me on the phone. "Just buy another one, Miss." Vance stood up slowly. She didn't need to shout. Mallory had just done the work for her. "Your Honor, Ms." Vance said quietly, "the state rests on the issue of motive and lack of remorse. The defendant views the victim's property as a resource she is entitled to destroy simply because the victim has the means to replace it." The judge took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I am ordering a forensic handwriting analysis of the document submitted by the defense," the judge said, "and I am referring the submission of this document to the district attorney's office for potential charges of obstruction of justice and perjury. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial." Mallory gasped. It was a wet, sucking sound. Garrick put his head in his hands and began to sob quietly. The judge looked at me. "MS. Cooper," he said, "before we adjourn this hearing, do you have a victim impact statement regarding the protective order you requested?" I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands were steady. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. The room was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I walked to the podium. I looked at Mallory. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were still full of hate. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry I fought back, Your Honor. I began. "This is not about a car. A car is an asset. It can be depreciated. It can be replaced. This is about the systematic dismantling of my identity, my financial security, and my safety by the people who were supposed to be my family. They stole my property. They impersonated me to commit fraud. They forged my signature to deceive this court. They believe that my hard work is their safety net and that my boundaries are suggestions. I am asking for a permanent protective order, not because I hate them, but because I need to survive them." I paused. I looked at Luke. He was staring at me, tears in his eyes, silently mouthing the word sorry. I took a breath to deliver the final sentence. I was going to ask for the maximum duration allowed by law, but I never got the chance. Mallory laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a manic, broken sound that cut through my speech like a knife. "Savadas," Mallory spat. "You think you are the survivor? Sienna Mallory. Be quiet, Mr. Sterling hissed, trying to grab her arm. She shook him off. She leaned over the table, her eyes wild, locking onto mine. "You stand there and talk about truth," Mallory sneered. "You talk about fraud. You talk about secrets. But you are the biggest fool in this room, Ms. Cooper," the judge warned, reaching for his gavel. "Nail me," Mallory screamed, ignoring the judge. "Go ahead. Send me to jail, but I'm taking him with me." She pointed at Luke. Luke's face went gray. He stood up, knocking the bench with his knees. Mallory don't. He begged. "Please tell her, Luke." Mallory yelled. "Tellsent. Sienna, why you really gave me the key. Tell her about the accounts." I stood at the podium frozen. "Tell her what you have been hiding for 3 years." Mallory screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Tell her about the other family you are paying for with her money." The gavel banged down. A thunderclap of wood on wood. "Order," the judge bellowed. "Order in this court." But it was too late. The words were out. They hung in the air like smoke. The other family. I looked at Luke. He wasn't looking at Mallory. He was looking at me. And the terror in his eyes wasn't for his sister-in-law anymore. It was for himself. Mallory smiled at me one last time as the bailiffs moved in to grab her. Just buy another husband. Sienna. She laughed. You can afford it. The courtroom was a cacophony of noise. The gavel banged down again and again, a wooden heartbeat trying to force order onto chaos. Mallory was still screaming about Luke, about secrets, about money. Luke was slumped on the bench, his face buried in his hands. A portrait of a man whose house of cards had not just fallen, but incinerated. I stood at the podium. I did not move. I did not look at Luke. I did not look at the gallery where the whispers were spreading like wildfire. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice cutting through the dying echoes of Mallory's outburst. The defendant is attempting to introduce hearsay and irrelevant personal matters to distract this court from the facts at hand. She is trying to create a fog to hide the crime. The judge looked at me. He stopped banging the gavel. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Ms. Huber, the judge asked. I am not here to discuss my husband's fidelity. I said, my tone cold, precise, and devoid of the tears Mallory wanted to see. That is a matter for a divorce court. I am here to discuss the theft of my property and the conspiracy to conceal it. And on that note, I have one final piece of evidence to submit regarding the defendant's claim of ignorance. I held up a USB drive. It was small, silver, and devastating. Ms. Vance, the prosecutor, stepped forward. What is this, Ms. Cooper? This is a backup of a voice note sent from Mallory Cooper to Garrett Cooper 3 days ago. I said it was recovered from a cloud backup on a shared family tablet I still have access to. I handed it to the bailiff. Play it, the judge ordered. The bailiff plugged it into the court's media system. A moment of static, and then Muller's voice filled the room. It wasn't the hysterical voice of the defendant. It was the smug, arrogant voice of the sister-in-law I knew too well. Don't worry about the dent, Garrett. Evelyn said she will call the insurance and pretend to be Sienna. She knows all the security questions. Sienna is so busy with work. She won't even notice the claim until it is paid. We just need to get the cash from Dylan and get the car back before the weekend. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of a coffin lid closing. Mallory's face went white. She stopped breathing. She knew that was the nail. That was the proof that Evelyn's call wasn't a panic move. It was a pre-planned strategy. It proved the conspiracy. It proved the intent to defraud. Ms. Vance looked at the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice sharp. In light of this recording, the state is amending the complaint. We are moving to add charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and identity theft against Mallory Cooper. Furthermore, we are requesting an immediate bench warrant for the arrest of Evelyn Cooper as a co-conspirator. The judge nodded, his face grim. Granted, the clerk will issue the warrant immediately. Mallory made a sound like a wounded animal. She spun around to look at Garrett. You didn't delete it, she shrieked. You idiot. You said you deleted it. Garrett was sobbing openly now. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head. And you, Mallory, turned on Luke, her eyes wild, looking for anyone else to blame. You stood there and let them do this to me. You knew. You knew about the key. You knew about the plan. Luke looked up. He looked at me. He saw the way I was looking at him, not with anger, but with total absolute indifference. I didn't know about the cargo. Luke stammered, his voice weak. I thought you needed a loaner, but you stole the key, Ms. Vance interrupted, turning to face him from the prosecution table. You facilitated the theft. That makes you an accessory before the fact. Mr. Cooper, Luke shrank back. He was trapped. If he denied it, he contradicted the email I had already sent. If he admitted it, he was a criminal. I just wanted to help my family. Luke whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic in the sterile air of the courtroom. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I said, may I finish my statement? The judge looked at me with a mixture of respect and something like fear. Please proceed. M. Cooper. I took a breath. I looked at Mallory. The defendant told me to just buy another one. I said, She believes that because I have earned my success, I am obligated to subsidize her failures. She believes that theft is just borrowing and fraud is just helping family. She is wrong. I gripped the sides of the podium. I am not asking for sympathy, Your Honor. I am asking for the law. I am requesting a permanent no-contact order against Mallory Cooper, Garrett Cooper, and Evelyn Cooper. I am requesting full restitution for the vehicle, the legal fees, and the forensic costs, and I want the record to reflect that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a predation. I paused. And regarding the insurance, I said, my provider has already informed me that due to the fraud, they will be honoring my claim under the theft clause. However, they will be subrogating the cost. That means they will be suing Mallory Cooper and her co-conspirators for the full $75,000 plus damages. I looked Mallory in the eye. So when she says just buy another one, she is right. She just bought my car and she will be paying for it for the rest of her life. Mallory slumped in her chair. The fight went out of her. She realized the math. She wasn't just going to prison. She was going to be bankrupt forever. The judge cleared his throat. The defendant is remanded to custody without bail pending trial. He ruled the risk of flight and witness tampering is evident. The no-contact order is granted effective immediately. Any violation will result in immediate felony charges. 2 bailiffs moved in. They pulled Mallory up. She didn't scream this time. She looked at me one last time, her eyes dead. Sienna, she whispered. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom. I heard the click of the handcuffs. I heard the heavy wooden gate swing shut. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the hallway. Sienna. It was Luke. He had run out behind me. He was breathless, sweating, his tie crooked. Sienna, wait, he pleaded, reaching for my arm. I flinched away and he pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. I stopped. I turned to look at him. He looked like a stranger, a weak, desperate stranger. Baby, listen, he said, words tumbling out. Mallory is crazy. She was lying about the other family. She was just trying to hurt us. You know that, right? We can fix this. I will explain everything. I will testify against them. I will do whatever you want. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my key while I was in the shower. I looked at the man who had let his family torment me for 3 days because he was too cowardly to protect his wife. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick white envelope. It wasn't sealed. I don't want you to testify. Luke, I said, then what do you want? He asked, hope flickering in his eyes. I handed him the envelope. I want you to sign this. He took it. He looked at the header on the top document. Separation agreement and financial severance. Sienna, he choked out. The locks are already changed. Luke, I said, the code to the apartment is reset. Your things are in boxes in the lobby with the concierge. You have 2 hours to pick them up before they are moved to storage at your expense, but my accounts, he stammered, are frozen. I said, pending the divorce verdict. If you really have offshore accounts, the forensic accountants will find them. And if you used marital funds to pay for this other family Mallory mentioned, I stepped closer to him. I will recover every single cent. Luke, just like I recovered the car. He stood there holding the envelope, his mouth opening and closing. He was drowning, and I was not a lifeboat. I was the ocean. I turned and walked away. I walked down the long marble corridor of the courthouse. My heels clicked a steady, rhythmic beat on the floor. Click, click, click. It was the sound of forward momentum. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the afternoon sun. The heat of the city hit me, but it felt good. It felt real. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. Notification. Permanent restraining order active. Case 4492. Notification. Insurance claim approved. Payout initiated. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like gasoline and asphalt and freedom. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. Not the spare key, not the key Luke had stolen. My keys. The keys to my apartment. The keys to my life. I closed my fist around them. The metal bit into my palm. Sharp and grounding. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look for a taxi. I started walking for the first time in 3 days. My heart was racing. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of a family that saw me as a paycheck. I was Sienna Cooper, and I was driving my own life. Now, thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So, please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Sienna's revenge. Did she go too far, or was it exactly what they deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people. Your support means the world. Stay safe and remember to keep your keys close.